UFOs, monsters, mysteries. You're listening to Talking Weird. And now, from a cabin deep in the Northwoods, your hosts, Dr. Dean Bertram and Jen Durrell.
Well, hey, baby.
Hey, baby.
I love that I can tell that fall's descending on the northern woods up here now. The mornings are crisper, the evenings are getting cooler. My pumpkins are gradually turning orange in my pumpkin patch. I can feel the spooky season descending upon me in my cabin here in the North Woods.
Yeah.
What about down in Missouri? How's it feeling there?
No, it's like 88 degrees and it's hot and sticky, and my leaves are falling, but that's just because I have a birch tree in the front. But
Speaking about leaves and trees, I was on a phone call today with my very good friend Wayne Klingman, and I can't remember what we were chatting about. He does a lot of mob and true crime kind of podcasting and books and things like that. Otherwise, I would have had him on the show. It'd be a great guest, but it's not quite Talking Weird. Maybe we can try to squeeze one of his things in one time. Anyway, we were just chatting, and out on my tree line, speaking of trees, there's kind of, it's a tree line, then it drops down, and there's more trees. I saw a big bird flying through there. And so I know it wasn't miles away because it was between them. It was below the trees on this side of the line, so it wasn't ridiculously high in the sky. So I had some kind of, points of reference. It was big. Now, I don't want to say it was like a thunderbird or, something supernatural, but it was bigger than any bird I've ever seen around here before. Bigger than any eagle, any vulture. It was big.
That's pretty cool.
I mean, who knows? But anyway, having seen that, I thought now I can see why people think they see these ridiculously large birds. I didn't see it long. Like if I said I saw it for 3 seconds, I might be exaggerating by half a second. It wasn't for very long, but it was definitely a bird. It was definitely flying, and it was definitely big. Flapping these big old wings. My goodness.
You should have a camera with you next time.
I don't think I would have had time to raise it up and get a focus and turn it on, to be honest. So maybe often people say, well, that we should have more photos of these things. Maybe those things that move quick, there isn't time to get a camera up. Who knows?
Probably not.
Anyway, we're going to go on another very interesting and strange adventure tonight. It mightn't involve large cryptid birds, but it will certainly involve all kinds of other strange. Our guest tonight, he's actually, I know he's one of our favorite guests, and he's one of our audience's favorite guests as well. He's been on the show. I think this is a record number. We've never had anybody on 3 times. This is his 4th time. He's a fascinating individual. He's used to be known as the psychic priest, and he actually is or was an ordained priest, and he was the exorcist or one of the exorcists for Ed and Lorraine Warren, and we've talked about that at some length on previous episodes. He was also a practitioner of the silver mind control method, and he's a professional hypnotherapist, and he's a stage magician, and he's done all kinds of wonderful, interesting things. And his most recent book, I believe it's called Be Still and Know. Anyway, we're about to chat about it. So if I'm wrong on that title, I'm sure he'll tell us. Anyway, I'm delighted to welcome back to the show, one of my all-time favorite guests, Edd Schultz.
Hello.
Greetings.
Hello. Greetings and salutations.
Oh, it's so good to have you back, Ed. You're the third baby in the baby mix, really.
I was just going to say, I should say, hey, babies.
Hey, babies.
So your book's finally dropped. Be Still and Know, right? Your most recent book?
That's right. Just this past week. I'm excited.
I'm excited. My copy's on the way, I haven't read it yet.
That's right.
Yeah.
Super excited to read. I think actually, Jen, do you have the book's trailer that you could screen for our audience?
Yeah, let me get that up real quick.
That would be awesome. And then we'll get into a chat about the book a little bit, I think. Although we've got all kinds of wonderful things to discuss tonight that you suggested, Ed, about psychics and mediums and Houdini, and it's going to be a fun show. Okay, let's roll it.
I don't know if I hit the button.
No, that
again.
doesn't look like
Find
my
out.
book.
Rewind it if you did.
Oh, yes, it does. Yes, it does. Okay. Yeah.
Do you want me
That's
to try just in case I jack it up again? Because I'm really
Just-
good at that.
Just go.
I don't think I hit audio. I guess we'll find out.
The world is filled with chaos and confusion. Everyone wishes they had inner peace, even if there is little outer peace. Be Still and Know by Edgar Schultz is a practical guide to Christian meditation that may be used individually or in groups. Drawing on Christian mysticism and modern science, the reader is led through a journey to new dimensions in spirituality. Included are guided meditations that may be read to a group or recorded for individual use. The author uses simple language and exercises to show the reader how to enter a meditative state and use imagination to enhance their life of prayer and worship. Be Still and Know explores the differences and similarities between Christian meditation, Eastern meditation, hypnosis, biofeedback, and other forms of relaxation techniques. Each chapter includes meditation exercises, a guided meditation, and questions for reflection. Be Still and Know is available from Amazon.com in either paperback or Kindle. Order yours today by clicking on the link below. Sounds
Well,
like a
the
great book. I think I'll order a copy of it.
I was just about to say, well, the link isn't below here. We'll put it in the show notes, but people can obviously find it, I would assume, quite easily just by going to Amazon.com and putting in Be Still and Know. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about that tonight because I haven't read it. But can you, I don't actually know what biofeedback is, which you mentioned in there. What's biofeedback?
Biofeedback was very popular in the 70s. It's basically, I guess the easiest way to explain it is it's for relaxation primarily. And the subject would be hooked up to some kind of electroencephalograph type thing or galvanic skin response machine that usually emitted an electrical, a visual, and maybe an auditory tone that would indicate for you where your heartbeat is or what level of consciousness you're in, what brainwave you're in, to help you get into an alpha or theta rhythm. And the main difference with it, with other techniques like meditation, things like that, is that there was some kind of physical sign that you could see that you were actually in that dimension. The sort of beep, 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 beep. If you're in waking consciousness, it's kind of beep, 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 beep. But then as you go into this alpha state, it's beep, 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 kind of thing. So you can see it, and you see to your biofeedback is taking your temperature with a thermometer is biofeedback. It's your body showing you that there's something going on inside. And so this is your mind, your brain telling you that you are getting into this relaxed state. Anyway, it was very popular. I think it's still around. I'm sure it is, but
maybe more people need to have those and strap them on when they're watching television, so they realize they've slid into an alpha state and are super suggestible by what the media is pumping into their minds. I'm not going to get too political, baby, don't worry, but I'm just saying, because that's what happens, right? You know probably Ed, as somebody who's an expert in these kind of things, television puts us into an alpha state. Is that correct? So we're more suggestible.
Buy popcorn. Of course, that's subliminal projection too. That's a whole nother thing. But that's true. Even when you're driving, sometimes you slip into this alpha/theta level of consciousness without even knowing it. It's like you're driving down the highway and you pass your exit. Well, why did you pass your exit? That's because you were experiencing something that sometimes is called highway hypnosis. You're just in this relaxed state, and you're kind of zoning out, and then all of a sudden, there it is. I missed it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because that's where you're going.
Yeah.
That
I
alpha
suggest that
state.
might be the reason, that highway hypnosis, why perhaps people see often strange things at the side of the road at night. If they're just staring at a dark road with just the white line going down the middle. Because so often people see Sasquatches or Mothman or goblins or all kinds of weird things in ditches when they're driving or alongside of the road at night. And whether it's totally just a delusion or whether it's somehow we're accessing something else, I've often suspected when I've driven itself by night and felt myself slipping into this kind of alternate state. I wonder how many of these reports I've read about people seeing anomalous entities on the side of the road as a result of that type of highway hypnosis you were just talking about.
Yeah, could be what's called a hypnagogic reverie. That's as you're starting to go into sleep and you start to get these little dreamlets. And the same thing is when you're waking up in the morning, if I remember correctly, that's called a hypnopompic reverie. But when you're beginning to go to sleep and you have these little dreamlets, they're called hypnagogic reveries. Cool name.
It is a cool name. And potentially this might be something which causes similar experiences when we're in bed at night, i.e. the alien abduction experience or a dead relative being at the side of your bed or something.
Right. And that coupled with sleep paralysis, is, who knows?
But,
it's all related in one way or another, but how much of it, that's one of the, my undergraduate major was philosophy. And I really enjoyed that because it opened my mind to the fact that a lot of these things, nobody knows, Nobody knows what's real or isn't real. And there's no way that you can prove it sometimes. So it's a lot of it is a mystery. It's weird. But it's all part of life. Weird as that may be.
Hence why you're the perfect guest for talking weird, because you know way too much about these kind of things, Ed, which is fantastic. For this episode, I know you suggest. It's true though. You suggested, and I jumped on it because it sounded so fantastic, that maybe we could do a show where you explained to the audience some of the differences between psychics, mediums, and mentalists. And I thought that's fantastic because you've kind of danced along those lines yourself, being somebody who's done stage magicianry or mentalism, and you clearly have, we've done remote viewing type things before, and we might do some of them again. But anyway, maybe before we get to, I think we were talking about maybe doing another remote viewing experiment tonight, which I'm super excited about. But maybe you could start by breaking down some of those definitions between psychic, medium, and mentalist.
Okay, a psychic, basically, and sometimes some of these terms are confused for one another. And I mean, the term psychic is a kind of generic term. Medium is a little bit more specific, and mentalist is more specific. But a psychic basically is a person who apparently is able to use extrasensory perception. That is the ability to get information without the use of the 5 physical senses. And of course, the different types of extrasensory perception are telepathy, which is mind-to-mind contact, clairvoyance, which is seeing something or being aware of something that's going on at this point in time, but in a different point in space. There's also precognition, which is the apparent ability to see things or be aware of things before they happen. And then there's telekinesis, which is also known as psychokinesis or PK, which is the apparent ability of the mind to move matter, which may be involved in healing and, levitating little things and stuff like that. So that's what psychic is. It's a sort of overarching term. A medium is a person who believes that through this kind of psychic type stuff that we've been talking about, they are able to communicate with departed spirits. So a psychic is not necessarily a medium, but a medium is a psychic. I've often heard the term psychic used for mediums, which in a sense is okay, but I'd rather they be called mediums because that's the specific kind of psychic that they are. They're also, quote, natural psychics and trained psychics. There's the belief that everybody has psychic ability. Some people, just like with music, some people are just natural musicians. Other people need to train and practice over and over and over again. And then they're trained musicians. Well, there are some people who are trained psychics. That's what I consider myself to be. Years ago, back in the 1970s, when I went through the Silva Mind Control course, that's what trained me to be able to use my psychic abilities. Now, the third term is mentalist. And a mentalist is, in a sense, something totally different from psychics and mediums. A mentalist is basically a magician, a trickster, a magician. Houdini's hero, Jean-Eugène Robert Houdin, once said, a magician is an actor playing the part of a magician. It's like Daniel Radcliffe is an actor who played the part of Harry Potter, the wizard. Daniel Radcliffe is not a wizard. He's an actor. Same thing with all of the great magicians, Houdini, Blackstone, Thurston. They were all actors who were playing the part of magicians. And a mentalist specifically is one who deals in the art and science of unusual feats of the mind. Now, that doesn't mean it's necessarily extrasensory perception. It's just unusual feats of the mind. And a typical stage mentalist, like you see on America's Got Talent, they are basically magicians. And they're using deceptive means to gather information with their physical senses, but it looks to the audience as though they're doing it without the use of their physical senses. Because I'm still basically a magician, I can't really reveal the secrets of how it's done, except to say that, we peek, we see information here, there, that you wouldn't think that we would be able to see, but we can see it. So a mentalist is a performer. A psychic and a medium are people who believe that they're using genuine psychic abilities, genuine extrasensory perception. But a mentalist is a fake. And they don't, but part of the mystique of the mentalist is, unlike a magician, I mean, when you see a magician, you know they're fake. You know that nobody can take a rabbit out of an empty hat. So you know that they're a fake. But one of the keys for a successful mentalist is you need to leave the audience with the question in mind, was that a trick? Or was that really some kind of psychic ability? That's what when I was a stage mentalist, that's what I used to do. I had this little opening speech. Indulge me for a moment. Ladies and gentlemen, down through the dim corridors of time has come the everlasting desire to penetrate the innermost recesses of the mind. Scientists tell us that we use only a small portion of the power of the subconscious mind. Imagine what would be possible if we could harness those hidden dormant powers of the mind, extrasensory perception. This evening, we're about to do a number of experiments which could be considered extrasensory perception. Notice that could be considered. That's sort of the out, because again, you're a magician. And a lot of the famous mentalists like Kreskin, who maybe we'll get into later on, would always say, oh, this is nothing supernatural. This is nothing supernatural. But I won't tell you what it is. It's just I have hypersensitivity or something like that. Kreskin was a real weirdo, but we'll get to him later. So that's the three basic categories: psychics, mediums, and mentalists. And there are fortunately or unfortunately. As I said, mentalists are fake. And if you really get to, when push comes to shove, they will tell you, okay, I'm fake. In fact, there was one mentalist, excuse me, who used the stage name Dr. Faust, a fellow by the name of David Hoy, who would begin his performances by saying, I am a mentalist, a mind reader, and I'm a fake. And then he would proceed with his show in which he would convince the people that he wasn't a fake, although he was a fake. But psychics don't say, I'm a fake. They say that they, have some genuine psychic ability. Now, there are some fake psychics, just as there are and have been some fake mediums. Some mediums, I'm sure, are, they're honest, trustworthy people who are doing what they believe they've been called to do. But there are and have been throughout time unscrupulous people who have taken advantage of other people's gullibility and their faith and used tricks, often magicians' tricks, to try to prove to people that, they're talking to the spirits.
As somebody who's been in both worlds, both in the psychic type world as well as in the mentalist and magician type world, I'm guessing there must be times when both of those things come into play, when you're wearing one hat, but it's hard not to let the other hat be worn. Like to rephrase it, and perhaps not to put it personally to you, I'm assuming that there have probably been people perhaps with some degree of psychic power, but having to perform or to have to do it again and again and again, they might, when they're not hitting, they might fall back on other techniques that they've picked up, which are more practical and which are mentalist, for example. Is that something that you're aware of happening, either when you've been doing either, or in the history of mentalism and the history of people with psychic ability or mediumship?
Yes, I'm sure. For example, one of the mediums that I wanted to talk about tonight was a fellow by the name of Daniel Douglas Hume, who was a early 19th century medium. He was born in Scotland and eventually came to America. And he did seances all over the world. He did all kinds of physical mediumship thing, rapping, different instruments playing themselves by themselves, spirit hands appearing out of nowhere, and levitation and all that sort of stuff. Now, there's some belief that in some ways he was indeed a genuine medium, but he also may have used trickery. He was never actually, as far as I know, he was never actually proven to be a fake. But some of the things that he did sound pretty magic-y to me. And I think it's really interesting, and maybe we'll get into this more later on, that nowadays you don't hear anything about physical mediums. You don't hear that much about seances either. Nowadays, a lot of it is just kind of one-on-one. Okay, now I'm, my spirit guide named Eloise is helping me find your deceased grandmother, and oh, there she is, and now we're talking. It's just that kind of thing. But years ago, beginning around the time of the Civil War, when 750,000 people died in America, everybody was struggling with their grief, and spiritualism began to flourish because people wanted some kind of assurance that their loved ones who had died are okay on the other side. And so spiritualism began to really flourish. And I'm sure that there were a lot of people, maybe Hume included, who were just plain fakes. But they knew that people were so gullible and so desperate to get some kind of assurance that they said, hey, if they fall for it, that's their problem. And it's going to line my pockets.
It's interesting when you were talking about, you don't see as much of that old mediumship with people sitting around tables and trumpets appearing in the middle of the air and playing, or ghostly hands manifesting. But a lot of that probably was, and I know some of it was discovered to be the type of
Yeah.
magician trickery we were talking about. What you do see today,
Yeah.
though, is that a new cultural phenomenon, and that is paranormal investigation and ghost hunting shows. And I think
Mhm.
maybe while some of those people sometimes might be genuine, I'm sure there's that equal pressure to perform for the camera, for the
Mm.
TV episode
Yeah.
week after week after week. So sometimes maybe they hit it, but in the episodes where they don't,
Yeah.
I know for a fact there's been pretty convincing YouTube breakdowns I've seen where it looks like one I won't say which show, but it looks like one of the investigators might be pulling a string in his pocket to make it look like something's
Mhm.
grabbing him from
Right.
behind or
Right.
something. And I'm sure
Yeah.
even when it isn't that extreme, you have to make, what was that noise? You have to make it more dramatic, because you can't do a
Right.
show where we went to the crazy famous asylum and nothing happened, and that's the show. We didn't get
Right.
anything. Next week, maybe something
That's
will
right.
happen. So there might be that
That's
same
right,
pressure
yeah.
to perform now as there was then. It just is
Sure.
a different format or medium.
Right.
Yeah.
No
Right.
pun intended.
Yeah, one of the weirdest things, talking about weird stuff, when they were doing all this physical medium stuff, and I think it's grotesque and disgusting, was this ectoplasm.
Oh, yes.
Ectoplasm was this foamy, grotesque substance that would come out of mediums' mouths and ears, and
Mhm.
inside there would be spirit faces and stuff like that. Oh, that's gross. I mean, it's like the medium's puking all over the place, but it's somehow supposed to be some kind of supernatural stuff that's coming out that's showing this. Oh, I don't know whoever came up with that, but they were a sick individual. But you never hear about ectoplasm anymore.
Not unless you're watching a Ghostbusters
Except maybe
movie, no.
I was just going to say Ghostbusters, you get slimed. Maybe that's ectoplasm.
Yeah.
I don't know. But yes, I think seriously, I think often, well, I shouldn't make a statement like that, but sometimes I'm sure that there are psychics and mediums who just don't hit it right. And so they fall back on something a little bit deceptive. As a matter of fact, when I was talking with you, Dean, the other day, I tried a little informal remote viewing experiment with both you and Jen, and I don't know if you had a chance to talk to Jen about any of this.
No,
but Jen,
I
do you have
left it for you to mention to us, so I didn't
okay,
talk to her.
Jen, do you have a mug that has like a teddy bear or a frog on it? By any chance? But it's a mug that you'd use put pencils and pens in?
I don't.
Okay.
I'm trying to think if my daughter does, but I don't think so.
No, I thought
Okay.
Ed was closer. He wasn't sure who he was hitting with it, but I have two mugs downstairs, both with pencils and pens and various other things in it.
Yeah.
And one of them didn't have a frog, but one of them had mushrooms which were physically carved into the side of the mug. Like it's not just a print even. And I think there's a connotation with frogs and mushrooms and things like that. And there was a decoration colored in by my daughter of a dinosaur hanging off the edge of that mug. And there was what looked like a pen, but it was really one of my daughter's wands, I think, with bunny ears in it. So there was a mug with those kind of childish imagery. So I thought Ed had hit close and maybe got that, but I said, we'll ask Jen and see if but I don't know if you want to do a separate actual, because we mentioned that we might do it, an actual remote viewing experiment tonight. I don't know if you feel up to hitting us with something now, Ed.
Maybe if we could postpone that a little bit. I have something sort of special, I think, in mind. And Jen, as I was doing this remote viewing thing, I was kind of looking at where you live and where Dean lives. Now, Dean had already told me that he lives in a log cabin. But as I was kind of looking at where you live, your front door, I had the impression that it was either red or green, or maybe had been one at one time and is now the other one. Does that mean anything to you? Red, green front door?
Well, it may have been at one time, but right now it's actually the same color behind me. It's orange.
Okay. Okay.
Doors.
Well, maybe that's sort of close to red, but
Yeah.
another thing that I sort of picked up as I kind of mentally went into the house, a lot of wood, a lot of like wood floors and wood cabinets, that sort of thing, and somewhere in the house I saw a deer head. Now, whether this is actually a stuffed deer head or a picture of a deer, I don't know if that means anything. And there was also another room that was kind of multicolored. It was maybe like a pink wall over here and an orange wall over here and some green doors. Does that make any sense at all?
Not really. My daughter's room is like,
No?
well, her room was pink at one time. Of course, now it's purple. But I have been wanting to, like with this room, I have been trying to figure out what to do with it. This used to be Wyatt's bedroom. So he's moved downstairs. We've done a lot of remodeling. So I've been wanting to do multicolor in this room. But I haven't done it yet, but I've been thinking about it.
Okay. Well, maybe that. Okay. Now I'm going to tell you something that I probably shouldn't. I said to Dean the other day that I had some primary impressions and some secondary impressions. The primary impressions were real remote viewing kind of things. And I did mention to Dean something about this big stairway that I saw in his house going up to the second floor, wider than a normal stairway. Truth of the matter is I was doing a little bit of mentalist stuff. Because I'm sending you both copies of my new book, Dean was kind enough to supply me with your mailing addresses. Well, I did what a lot of fake mediums and psychics probably do. I went to Zillow.com and I put in your addresses, and that's where I saw this wide staircase. That's where I saw all the wooden floors. And the deer head. How long have you been living where you're living?
Since 2017, but the people before me had a deer head, probably.
There you go.
I think they did.
Probably because actually what's on Zillow is it looks like it's in a dining room or something like that. There's a picture on the wall that's a sort of silhouette. It's a white deer head with a slightly dark background. And there is a picture of a multicolored room that has like a pink wall and an orange wall and some green doors. So that's just kind of to show you what, and I did say to Dean as an out, this may be from the present. This may be something I'm picking up from the past.
You did say
because obviously the pictures that are on Zillow are not of your house as it currently is. They're probably the house, right, when you bought it.
Yeah.
So there we are.
That is interesting. That's
because I think downstairs was peach and kind of a teal-ish, minty color green, and it was a green, actually minty green closet door. So
there you go, the tricks. What about the bandaged dog though, Ed? Was that was a primary one?
Oh, that's right. That was a primary. Jen, does a bandaged a dog with bandages around his middle mean anything to you?
Like currently?
I don't know.
No. I mean, in the past, yes, but not.
Well, in fairness, I don't know if I'm going to play devil's advocate for Ed, as cynical and as skeptical as I am about all these kind of things. You've told me multiple times that Truman's had difficulty walking of late and has had all these. So a bandage around the middle might be metaphorical as much as real, because your dog was having trouble walking. His middle was funny.
He's still got some weird stuff going on with his back. He's really short. He's got a long body, and his back disc has got some issues. So sometimes he's A-okay, and other times he just can't lift his leg up. Poor little guy. He's got to squat.
Is he a basset hound by any chance?
Well, He was supposed to be a Zukon, which is half Shih Tzu and Bichon. So he's like a teddy bear breed dog. And
Is he black?
No, all white.
No,
No. But the veterinarian seems to think he must have a basset hound in him because he's got the little basset hound legs, or the legs go out
that's
like
interesting.
that.
Wow.
And he's really long.
So the vet's actually told you he has some basset
He thinks
hound.
because he's. I mean, I grew up with basset hounds, so he does have basset hound legs. I mean, they go out, but I think Shih Tzus have that problem too, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I didn't want to tell Ed when he said about the bandaged dog that I knew Truman had health issues, because I'm not sure of remote viewing how.
I used to bandage him up. He gets hot spots because he's allergic to everything. So
Well,
he's
there you
had bandages on his legs and stuff like that before.
Huh, who knows? It's interesting.
Well, we'll give me a 5% accuracy then. How's that?
I give you listen, there's a dog that has trouble walking, is part basset hound.
Well, okay.
And I'm skeptical with all this. Like, I'm not going to give you 100%, but I'd give you over 50% with that hit. I mean, I think that's pretty sick dog, troubles in its midsection, has been bandaged in the past, part basset hound. I mean, that's more than a 5%.
Well, wait a minute. There is in the past, I won't mention any names because I really don't want to, but somebody used to live here and their dog had no use of their back legs, and sometimes we'd have to pick up the dog by putting a bandage or some type of towel up so he could walk. So
went up to 65%.
I had a basset hound at one time and I had to do that too. Yeah. I had a great basset hound. Barney was his name.
Barney.
Barney the basset hound.
Tell me a little bit about sometimes the animosity between magicians who understand how people can be manipulated and mediums or psychics. And I think Harry Houdini would be a great point of entry to that conversation.
Okay, sure. Yeah, Houdini, in a sense, Dean, Houdini was sort of similar to you. I want to believe. Okay. And he had a very strong attachment to his mother. And his mother died. I believe he was in Europe or something like that while his mother died in the United States. And this was around the time that spiritualism was really blossoming. And one of Houdini's best friends was Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who wrote the Sherlock Holmes books. And Doyle's wife was a medium. She used to do things primarily through what's called automatic writing. In other words, her hand would write all sorts of things, and she believed it was spirits who were doing the writing, and it wasn't really she who was doing it. So anyway, Houdini's mother died, and he had heard a lot about. He was a fake psychic in the sideshows when he was young. So he knew something about the fake stuff, but he also really wanted to believe that he could get some assurance that his mother was okay on the other side and that she would come back. And so he went to a medium. And while he was in the seance room, I can just imagine what was going through his mind, because he knew all the tricks that this fake medium was doing. And he got livid, and he stopped them in the middle of the seance, and he said, "I'm Houdini and you're a fake." And he got so angry that he launched a big campaign. In fact, toward the end of his career, in all of his big magic shows, he would have a whole segment that would be an expose of the tricks of fake spirit mediums. And he had rewards for people who would he had rewards for people who would prove that they were genuine spirit mediums, and he couldn't duplicate the things that they were doing, that sort of thing. So he had this huge campaign against all of these people. In fact, he almost parted ways. He did part ways for a while with Conan Doyle, because Conan Doyle's wife did this seance in which she supposedly wrote some stuff about Houdini's mother. and she was calling him Harry. Harry, I want you to know that everything is okay, and I'm all right on the other side. Don't worry about me. Harry, Harry. Well, two things. Number one, she didn't speak English. She was a Jewish woman from, I think, Hungary. So, she didn't speak English, and Harry Houdini's name was not Harry Houdini. It was Eric Weiss. So the mother always knew him as Eric, and his mother would not call him Harry. And if she's on the other side, where she, supposedly would know so much, why would she call him Harry? And why would she all of a sudden be able to speak English? I mean, maybe when you die, you're multilingual.
Maybe.
Who knows? But that got him so angry that for the longest time he would speak with Conan Doyle.
Huh.
So he had a really big campaign against fake spirit mediums.
I know Doyle certainly chased a lot of those kind of things. Like he chased those Cottingley fairy photos, and he was one of the great proponents of the reality of those photos, if I recall. So he wanted to believe far more than I do. He really wanted to believe, I think, Doyle was, which is ironic because he invented the greatest objective character, perhaps in English literature, Sherlock Holmes, who could always see through any kind of shenanigans, but Doyle himself didn't seem to be able to see through a lot of the shenanigans.
No. And a lot of that, I think, is because of an emotional connection. In fact, there's a phenomenon that some people have called the Houdini Syndrome. Houdini, he was an escape artist, basically, in addition to being a magician, but escapes were his forte. And there were a lot of people, again, because the spiritualist movement was very popular, who believed that Houdini didn't do his escapes by trickery, but that he somehow supernaturally dematerialized out of these chains and boxes and rematerialized somewhere else. And Houdini would say, I'm not going to tell you how I did it, but it was a trick, and I didn't do it by some kind of supernatural means. And often these people in this audience would say, oh, I know you're just being modest. You don't want to tell us that you're really a great medium, a great psychic. So they would go away believing that this was still true. In fact, I had this happen to me once back in the 70s. I did a lecture that was called ESP or Trickery. And I did some things like bending keys with my mind and that sort of thing, and reading people's minds and stuff like that. And I actually had people who were friends of mine who were in the audience who said, Ed, you have such power, such super. And I said, no, it's a trick. And they said, oh, come on. I know you're just trying to be modest because you're a priest, but I know this is real stuff. And I thought, oh, come on. I'm telling you it's fake. If I weren't a member of the Society of American Magicians at the time, I would have shown them how I did it. But even that maybe wouldn't have convinced them.
What was your feeling on Penn and Teller and magicians like that who blow the secrets out of the water?
Oh, I hated Penn and Teller with a passion. Because this is, as a magician, you are an illusionist. You're an actor again, and you're trying to create the illusion that you're able to do all of these impossible things. Just like a good actor is trying to create the illusion that they are a different person from a different place and a different time. And a lot of these actors who are typecast, that's because they do such a good job creating that illusion that they are this kind of person. So that's a tribute to them that they're typecast, because people are convinced that they really are this kind of person. They may be a jerk in real life, but they convince people because they're good actors that they are this kind of person. So as a magician, what you try to do is, again, create that illusion that this is perhaps reality. I used to start my magic shows by saying, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Sauber the Magician, and I'd like to welcome you to an evening in which fantasy becomes reality and dreams come true. A world of magic. And that, magic is just a trick when you reveal the secret, like Penn and Teller do. It's not magic anymore, really. Part of the fun. It's kind of like, it kind of reminds me of when I used to watch Peter Pan on TV with Mary Martin in the 50s. One of the greatest things was being able to see her fly across the stage. But occasionally the lighting was just such that you could get a glimpse of the wire. And it just crushed me. I didn't want to see the wire. I wanted to believe that Mary Martin / Peter Pan could really fly. So that was like, creating an illusion. It was acting. And I think, again, to get back to the media, I'm sorry, go ahead, Dean.
No, you go ahead.
Getting back to the mediums and psychics and whatever, I think sometimes they feel the necessity to do some of that to help prove beyond a shadow of a doubt to people who are there that this is real.
That leads in exactly to what I was about to ask you. You talked about bending keys in your act and how people were convinced, and you talk about the ability for a mentalist to portray it as real, and perhaps a psychic or a medium to use the type of tricks that magicians or mentalists use. So that obviously makes me think of Uri Geller and spoon bending. What's your take on Mr. Geller?
Well, I think he was a fake because most of the things that he did, I could buy in a magic catalog for $20 or something like that. I mean, nowadays there are 10 or 20 different versions of bending spoons and forks and knives and all that sort of stuff in magic catalogs. And I used to have I can tell you this much, I had a gimmick that I kept in my pocket that I used to bend keys. I won't tell you what the gimmick was like or exactly how it worked, but I mean, that's what it was. So if I could do that for $10, I think that's what it cost me then. If you watch Geller really closely, you might catch him with something like that. And sometimes the test conditions were so strict that Geller would say, I have a headache. It's just not working tonight. The vibrations aren't right. I think it was on the Johnny Carson show or something like that. They had all these experiments they wanted him to do, and he blew them all. None of them worked because the test conditions were so strict. And he said he had a headache or something like that. Honey, I have a headache. But
Just disappoints the whole audience, not just his wife.
Yeah,
that's right. That's right.
But
so I think Uri Geller was a fake.
Okay. That's
Go ahead.
interesting. I've suspected as much without having your kind of background as well. There was something very showmanship about Geller, I thought, He had the feel of a magician almost to him,
Yeah.
And he
and I
still
understand.
does. I don't think Geller's passed yet. He's still kicking around.
Yeah, I think he's still around. I think I remember hearing that he did do magic when he was a kid. So voila. I mean, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a professional magician, and I was attracted mostly to mental magic, mentalism, mind reading, because number one, as a 12 or 13-year-old kid, it made me feel more adult. Okay. Mentalism is for adults. It's not for little kids. And I was tired of doing birthday parties for kids. I wanted to be an adult because I was 12 years old and, feeling my oats and the hormones raging and stuff like that. And so mentalism was something that, again, looked like maybe this is real. And I think I told you in one of my previous appearances here about the time that I did some simple mentalism for a bunch of professional hypnotists and hypnotherapists. And at the end of the performance, this biochemist from India, Dr. Abdul Khazar, came up to me and he said, "Young man, you're the greatest psychic that I've ever seen in my life." And I thought, wow, $50 worth of magic tricks, and I convinced this guy who's a biochemist, expert in hypnosis, that I'm a genuine psychic. Whoa. Hey, if I can do that, I can conquer the world. I can get rich. Something else, like, have you ever seen the movie Nightmare Alley with Tyrone Power?
I know the
it
you know
was
what I
from the-
know the name of the film.
from the-
I don't think I've seen it though.
Okay, there's a new version coming out pretty soon, with one of my least favorite actors, Bradley Cooper. But anyway,
Del
basically
Toro's
was
directing the new one. That's right.
Yeah, it was basically about a carnival mentalist who got lucky, and he had a lot of charm, and he had a lot of charisma, and his act got bigger and bigger and bigger, and then he began to believe in his own psychic ability, and he became more of a medium, even though it wasn't real stuff. He kind of had the idea that he was beginning to talk to the spirits, but a lot of what he was doing was fake. So he was getting caught up in his own fantasy world. And spoiler alert, he ends up becoming the geek in the carnival because he goes nuts, biting the heads off chickens and, the wild man of Borneo kind of thing. But he was a big fake. And that reminds me too of Lamar Keene. I don't know if you're familiar with Lamar Keene. He was a popular medium in around the 60s, 70s. Very big, very rich. There's a spiritualist camp in Indiana called Camp Chesterfield, and he was big there, making all kinds of money, doing seances and readings for wealthy people. Finally, he had a come to Jesus moment or something like that, and he decided to blow the whistle. And he said, this is all fake. I have people on the staff who are picking your pockets, and they're going in your rooms while you're out, looking through your stuff to find information that I can give you during the readings and during the seance. And by the way, we have thousands and thousands of note cards with notes about all of you people here who come to the camp to get readings. And we share those with other mediums in other camps. So, somebody from Camp Silverbell can send us a thing saying, hey, do you know Dean Bertram is coming? Oh, Dean Bertram, let's see. Yeah, he came here.
No.
We got all kinds of stuff we'll send you. And he wrote a book called The Psychic Mafia, because he said there was a vast network that he was a part of. He was not very popular with the spiritualist people after that.
He was the Penn and Teller of the spiritualist world.
Yeah.
Now, tell me, because we'll be winding down soon, but tell me a little bit about it, because there's some commonalities here. The sleeping prophet Edgar Cayce was a Christian, a very devout Christian who also had allegedly a degree of psychic powers. Can you tell us a little bit about Edgar Cayce and your take on the man?
Yeah, he's fascinating. I first learned about him when I was about 12 years old, and there was a popular radio talk show in Boston, the Jerry Williams Show on WMEX, and they used to have a man by the name of Dr. Gilbert Holloway on there who would talk often about Edgar Cayce. Now, Edgar Cayce, when he was young, was not terribly bright, apparently, and around the age of 13, he apparently had a vision in which this angelic being came to him and said, Edgar, what do you want to do with your life? And Edgar said, I want to help people. And the angel said, okay. And Edgar said, by the way, I'm kind of stupid. I don't do very well in school. I don't remember things that I've read. So the angel said, I want you to go home and I want you to put your school books under your pillow when you go to bed at night. And he did that. And apparently when he woke up in the morning, he remembered everything that was in the books. So the story goes. And a little bit later in his life, he had some laryngitis kind of problem. It was probably a psychosomatic thing. He had trouble speaking, and he went to a hypnotist. When he was under hypnosis, he could speak like anybody else. And this led him to be hypnotized from time to time, because one of the times in one of the sessions, he began to say these really strange things. And eventually, Edgar Cayce would go into these hypnotic states, and he would diagnose illnesses from people whom he had never met, who weren't there. Other people would give him the name and the location of the person, and he would diagnose their illnesses and often prescribe holistic treatments, diet, exercise, all that sort of stuff. And throughout his life, he did over 14,000 life readings on people like this. And often people were cured of their various things, not all the time, but often. He also, as he got more and more advanced, began to do these more metaphysical readings. And he had readings on all sorts of things like reincarnation and God and life after death and the future and all this sort of stuff. And they began, there's an organization here in Virginia Beach, called the ARE, the Association for Research and Enlightenment, or the Edgar Cayce Foundation. You can Google it. And they have all of his readings in their archives. And I think there have been more books written on Edgar Cayce than on any other psychic who's ever been known. So he was a fascinating person. Died at about 1945. I believe it was tuberculosis.
You know, the interesting thing, as an aside, is 10 years after he passed in 1955, Hopkinsville, which is where he came from in Kentucky, had the famous Hopkinsville Goblins UFO landing and attack on the farmhouse there. I'm always interested when strange things come out of the same area. So Edgar Cayce, as you said, may be one of the world's most recognized or remembered psychics. Not that long after he died, like a decade after, one of the most famous UFO accounts of all time comes from the place where he was born and spent his youth. So I've always found that incredibly fascinating. But tell us a little bit about how people can get a hold of you or follow you or buy your new book. And you can mention a little bit about it again if you like as well, your most recent book.
Oh, okay. Well, the book is called Be Still and Know, A Practical Guide to Christian Meditation. My next book, I think, is going to be Calm, Peace, Relax, A Practical Guide to Self-Hypnosis. But I wrote the book because I used to teach meditation in a lot of the churches in which I worked. Because it just, to me, I think we've come to a point in our society where the whole idea of the holy, the sacred, the supernatural, in some senses, is relegated to the lunatic fringe. I'm sorry to use a term like that, but people don't take it seriously, and I think they're doing a big disservice to themselves, because I think the idea of there being another spiritual world that surrounds us and that even is over, under, around, and through us, that sort of thing. We really need to look into that. We've lost that. We've become so materialistic. So the church, as far as I was concerned, became so caught up in social action. Now, social action is a very important thing, for the church to be doing, but it's become so involved in that it's forgotten about the spirituality ingredient of the church. There are the two great commandments: love God and love your neighbor. Well, we're trying to do a lot of love our neighbor stuff, but we're not doing too much loving God stuff anymore. And that's where meditation comes in. That's how you begin to unleash, tap into the hidden dormant powers of the mind. And so I think, hypnosis, meditation, biofeedback, all of these things are really something that should be a normal part of our lives. They shouldn't just be something that, is in the occult section of the bookstore or the library. They should be right out there in the open. We'd probably be a lot better off than we are.
No, I agree with you, Ed. I think we've lost that connection with God, or that connection with a higher power. So people can get the book on Amazon.com. Just search for Be Still and Know. Put Edd Schultz in as well if you can't find it.
Right.
Just under Be Still and Know. Do you have a Facebook page or a website or something where people can find you?
Well, let's see. I do have a Facebook page called Hypnotic Coach. That's Hypnotic Coach. That you probably can find. I'm a little hesitant to just give my regular Facebook page because I don't want, all of a sudden 10,000 followers with all my personal stuff that's going on. But I do have an email address, hypnoticcoach@gmail.com, where people can reach me if they would like to. I am retired now from doing hypnotherapy and all that sort of stuff in ministry, and I'm just right now basically I'm a writer, trying to compile a lot of the stuff that I've done throughout the years and finally put it into book form and get it out there. Maybe even I'm working on some YouTube channels too. So
I think
we'll keep you posted, Dean. So
we'll have you back on.
Share that
if you
with
have
people.
Anything you to share, because you are one of the most, not just the most fascinating people I've ever had on this show, one of the most fascinating people I've ever met, which is why I keep coming back to get you on, Ed. I can't wait to read Be Still and Know. I can't wait to read the following books. And until we have you back, hopefully soon, make sure to keep it weird.
Yes, sir. By the way, I'm sorry we didn't have time for the remote viewing experiment. We'll do that the next time I come. And what I'm going to do, what I wanted to do is an Edgar Cayce kind of thing. Not just a remote viewing. So we'll save that for next time.
Now you're really
use that as a teaser. All right.
Take care, mate.
Yeah. Hey.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us tonight. If you're interested in checking out more episodes, you can find us at talkingweird.com. If you haven't already, please like the show on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Talking Weird Podcast. Make sure you never miss an episode by subscribing to Talking Weird. We're available on most podcast platforms and YouTube. And if you do enjoy the show, please leave us a review. Dean and I would really appreciate it. Until then, stay safe and keep it weird.